Kia ora everyone, thank you. I think everyone's back in the room. We have now Brendan and Dave coming up for our council submission on the Resource Management, Freshwater and Other Matters Amendment Bill. I'm happy to move what's there. Yeah. Councillor Dotton will second, then we'll go to the presentation. Then there could be no doubt many questions. Kia ora, Brendan. Thank you.
Perhaps I could just note that central government has come out with quite a lot of reforms of late, and we're obviously trying to provide responses as and when we can, and this is one of those examples where we've put together a reply quite quickly, or at least some of the issues for the committee to consider. We felt that the issues here were worthy of the committee's attention, and it does reflect on some of the work we've done over the last 3 to 4 years in particular. So Brendan Judd, Senior Analyst, Natural Environment Strategy Unit, will provide you the presentation and overview of the particular elements of this particular piece of work, which will no doubt be of interest to some. So thank you, Brendan.
Kia ora, Dave, thank you. So as Dave said, I'm here to update you guys on the Resource Management, Freshwater and Other Matters Amendment Bill, and we're basically here to seek delegated authority to sign off a submission on that bill. So the bill was first introduced to Parliament on the 28th of May and was referred to the Primary Production Committee. The consultation was announced on the 30th of May, and that didn't leave a massive window for us to prepare the committee paper that we distributed to you. So that committee paper didn't include recommending council positions, but we do have those recommended positions today, and we'll run you through those. Submissions close on the 30th of June. That's a Sunday and also Mātariki weekend, so in actual reality, we need to get the submission prepared a bit sooner than that. And the bill includes 6 key areas of proposed change to different components of resource management regulations and policy, primarily around freshwater and Indigenous biodiversity. So the first key area of change is to exclude the hierarchy of obligations within Te Mana o Te Wai from resource consent decision making. Currently, Auckland Council is required to have regard to all national policy statements and their associated provisions when considering an application for a resource consent. This includes the hierarchy of obligations in Te Mana o Te Wai in the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management. And just as a refresh, the hierarchy of obligations prioritises the health and well-being of water bodies and freshwater ecosystems and the health needs of people over the ability for people and communities to provide for their social, economic and cultural well-being. The bill proposes to remove this requirement, or the requirement for council to have regard to the hierarchy of obligations in resource consent decision making only. Resource consent decision making will still need to have regard to all other provisions in the NPSFM and all other national policy statements. And it's also important to know that council is still obligated to give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai and the hierarchy of obligations in all other processes, so that includes things like the freshwater plan change. This proposed change only relates to resource consent decisions. Staff recommend we oppose this proposal in our submission. The governing body has previously supported Te Mana o Te Wai and the hierarchy of obligations. Auckland Council is committed to Te Mauri o Te Wai, which is the regional expression of Te Mana o Te Wai, as the vision for water in the Auckland Water Strategy. There is no evidence to suggest that the hierarchy of obligations has been used to decline a resource consent anywhere. Central government could only find 2 instances where it was referenced in declining a consent, but concluded these consents would likely have been declined anyway, and it has never been used in the Auckland region as a sole reason to decline a consent. There is no evidence to suggest that it is creating barriers to resource consent processes, or that the proposed change will have any implications on future resource consent decision making. In fact, if anything, the proposal adds unnecessary complexity to the resource consent process. Council will still be required to have regard to all other policies in the National Policy Statement for Freshwater Management, but will not be able to consider a key component of the policy's central purpose. The proposed change will also impact partnerships with mana whenua. Te Mana o Te Wai is a concept that was developed by iwi as a way of describing the importance of fresh water within a te ao Māori framework. Singling out this policy undermines the work done by tangata whenua to contribute to that kaupapa. The second area of proposed change is to align consenting pathways for coal mining and other extractive activities in natural inland wetlands and significant natural areas. Currently, freshwater and indigenous biodiversity regulations enable consent pathways for mineral extraction activities in wetlands and significant natural areas. However, coal mining has additional controls compared to other mineral extraction. These additional controls essentially limit the consent pathway to existing mines and include a sunset clause for that pathway to be used up until 31 December 2030. The sunset clause only applies to thermal coal. It does not apply to coking coal, which is the grade of coal used for steel and stainless steel production. The purpose of these additional conditions on coal mining is to align pathways for coal extraction with the planned managed phase out of thermal coal use under the emissions reduction plan. The proposal removes these additional limitations, so removes the limitation on existing mines, so it enables new mines, and also removes the sunset clause. Staff recommend we oppose this proposed change in our submission. Staff previously opposed the current consent pathway for coal mining, even with the additional limitations, and the proposal is in conflict with Auckland Council's freshwater, biodiversity and climate objectives, in particular Auckland's ability in alignment with its decarbonisation pathway. The third area of proposed change is to delay requirements to identify new significant natural areas in the Auckland Unitary Plan by 3 years. The National Policy Statement for Indigenous Biodiversity requires Council to identify and notify new significant natural areas in the Auckland Unitary Plan by 2027. The proposal pushes this back to 2030. The intent of this is to give central government a bit more time while they review the significant natural area requirements more broadly within that policy statement. The proposal will not have any implications on significant natural areas that have already been identified in regional plans. So in the Auckland Unitary Plan, we call those significant ecological areas. So all significant ecological areas that we already have identified won't be impacted by this change. Our interpretation is that the proposal does not impact Council's ability to identify new significant ecological areas before 2030 should we want to do that. However, there is some ambiguity there, so we would like to seek clarification in our submission on that especially. The deferral may impact some planned work that we have to review significant ecological areas within the 10-yearly review of the Auckland Unitary Plan if criteria for significant natural areas change significantly. However, because of our internal time frames and where we're at on our significant natural area journey, we don't envision that risk is going to be particularly large. And because of that, staff suggests we take a neutral position on this proposed change. The fourth proposed change is to remove stock exclusion requirements for low sloped land. Low slope land is currently used as a trigger for stock to be excluded from water bodies under the National Stock Exclusion Regulations. Specifically, low slope land is used as a trigger to exclude all beef cattle and deer stock from lakes and rivers and all stock from natural wetlands. The trigger is identified using a low sloped map. The proposal removes the low slope map and associated requirements from National Stock Exclusion Regulations, meaning beef cattle and deer that are not intensively grazed will not need to be excluded from wide rivers and lakes, and all stock will not need to be excluded from natural wetlands unless those wetlands support threatened species or are identified in the Auckland Unitary Plan. Stock exclusion requirements will still apply to dairy cattle, pigs, and beef cattle and deer that are intensively grazed. Central government highlighted the challenges with the accuracy of the low sloped map and proposed a more nuanced risk-based approach for stock exclusion to be taken through freshwater farm plans and Council's regional plan provisions. And while staff recognise that there have been challenges with the low slope map, we question why improvements to the mapping approach were not considered by ministry officials instead of solely considering the removal option. And we also recognise that the removal of a geospatially defined map to identify triggers does make it challenging for compliance monitoring and enforcement for stock exclusion. So the current stock exclusion requirements in the Auckland Unitary Plan are ineffective, and until the freshwater plan change is notified and freshwater farm planning system is rolled out in Auckland over the coming years, the proposal will result in a gap in stock exclusion in the region. This will have an adverse effect on freshwater and freshwater ecosystems. even a small number of stock entering waterways can have significant adverse effects on fresh water. And for this reason, staff recommend that we oppose the proposal as drafted. However, we also recommend that if central government remove the low slope map requirements for stock exclusion through a sunset clause that is tied to the notification of regional councils' freshwater plan change, where we will have regionally nuanced stock exclusion rules, then we would support that. The next area of proposed change is to repeal intensive winter grazing resource consent requirements. Intensive winter grazing is not commonly practiced in the Auckland region, and so we propose we take a neutral position on this change and defer to regional councils where intensive winter grazing is regularly practiced. The sixth and final area of proposed change is related to the RMA more broadly, looking at ways to speed up the process to prepare and amend national direction. So there are currently two different processes that can be taken for central government to prepare or amend national direction. And when I talk about national direction, I'm referring to things like national policy statements and national environmental standards. One is managed through a board of inquiry process, which uses an independent board, and another is managed by the minister and ministry officials, which is called a 46A process. Currently, proposals to amend national direction can take either of these processes. The amendment bill proposes to remove the board of inquiry process and rely solely on the section 46A process, and in doing so, seeks to make this process more efficient. This includes giving the minister more discretion to set timeframes for consultation, making the evaluation processes needed by ministries less rigorous, and increasing the criteria for what can progress without a formal process. And that includes things like amendments to national direction to give effect to the emissions reduction plan and national adaptation plan. While staff do recognise that there is possibly merit in streamlining processes, we recommend Council oppose the proposal as drafted. Staff have concerns that the ability to set even shorter consultation timeframes will impact both Council and mana whenua's ability to engage with these processes. As we all know, Council and mana whenua engagement is an essential component of producing robust policy, and even under the current timeframes, it is already really difficult for us to engage with these processes. So any attempt to shorten those will massively impact our contributions. So I've also questioned why central government proposed a less rigorous evaluation framework for national changes, which can have quite wide-reaching and possibly significant implementation implications, but regional councils are still required to go through the more rigorous evaluation process for regional and district plans. We also have concerns that the less rigorous process will miss important costs and benefits and will be more likely to result in unintended consequences. This is particularly concerning given the pipeline of proposed changes to national direction that are on the horizon. In relation to widening the criteria for what can be considered without a formal process, the intent of this is because criteria like the emissions reduction plan or national adaptation plan have already gone through consultations. However, the high-level directions outlined in these plans could be implemented in any number of ways, and detailed consultation on specific approaches for implementation are important to work through any teething problems. So that's a summary of those 6 areas of change and then the recommended positions from council staff. And then today we're seeking delegated approval of the submission to the chair and deputy chair and member of Hakuta. And council will prepare the submission in line with those overarching positions that I've highlighted.
Thank you very much, Brendan. A huge amount of work has gone into this in quite a short period of time, as is these things we get from governments, no matter what shade they are these days, very quick turnaround. So this is a complex issue. Have put up some chair's recommendations, if we could have those up maybe, because I thought it was important to at least, and so did Councillor Dalton, to put out there broader than just, hey, we're going to do a submission based on our current positions. I thought it was good to call some of those positions out, and if members felt they didn't want to support certain things, that they would have that choice. I have 4 questions so far. Councillor Baker.
Yeah, thanks for putting those up, because there's a few up there that I won't be supporting. But some questions for you, just running through them. So the exclusion of the obligations from Te Mana o Te Wai, are you saying that, so your I guess assessment is that the way in which that we apply the current regulations is absolutely spot on, and we don't need to, I guess, advocate outside of opposing the, so we're opposing what the government are proposing, but we don't need to actually push for amendments if it's not, if it is retained in some way. Are you saying that what we've got is currently spot on and doesn't need changing in terms of resource consenting?
Thank you. I'm not necessarily saying what we have is spot on. What I'm saying is when making a decision on a resource consent, the decision makers are weighing up a whole range of things, including Te Mana o Te Wai, but also a lot of other national policy statement direction. And it's not currently being used solely as a reason to decline applications. And so there's no evidence to suggest that this change is actually needed or will have any impact on the resource consent process.
Okay, I reserve my right to speak on that little issue, Chair. In regards to, it's interesting that we take a neither oppose or support. How many coal mines have we got in Auckland? And how much, because I look at that and I wonder why it is we're taking an opposed when actually, my understanding is there are no coal mines in Auckland and it doesn't actually impact on us, but yet we are taking an opposition to it. I want to understand more why it is we take that as opposed to doing a neither opposed nor support.
Yeah, so you're right, but the pathways for coal mining will impact carbon emissions. So even though we don't extract coal, we do use coal, and so we have decarbonisation pathways, and we're committed to decarbonisation pathways that will align with that direction. And I guess the other key point is the mana whenua are particularly concerned about this direction, and although we don't have any coal mines, there are mana whenua in Auckland although he transcends regional council boundaries and into areas that do have coal mining.
So we're taking a political view as opposed to a direct, I guess, view on how it impacts us. We are siding on a political side of things to oppose something.
I guess you can't, to ask the staff if they're being political, the proposal, as I understand, and that's why I thought it was important to lay it out, comes from our current plans and policies, which include Te Tarakia Tawhiri, which includes protection of wetlands, which include Māori outcomes. So the staff are presenting what are currently our policy and direction, and I guess on the other ones, like stock exclusion, I mean, the intensive winter grazing, it's more on a, I guess, privately affected, and we don't have that. But we also have conditions on that already if we were to have that. But this direction didn't come from me, and I don't think I would say the council would being political, but they are leaning on a direction that our council's already approved unanimously in the past. With that.
Passed. So my last question is, so I appreciate that you come to the Rural Advisory Panel and you did in May, and you highlighted and raised with us that these amendments were coming. What has there been any attempt to actually get from our Rural Advisory Panel advice on how council might shape its response to this being an advisory panel to council?
So the simple answer to that is not yet, and I guess that's partly because this was only read in Parliament a week or so back, and so it's really a time frame issue. If we were operating where we had a month or 6 weeks to respond, we'd be going to the various avenues that we would normally do to get some of that feedback. We don't have the luxury, not with this bill alone, but with a number of bills at the moment, of actually doing the full range of engagement that we would expect do. I think what I would say through the chair is that, I mean, one of the things that we're kind of keen on is getting some of the feedback from councillors and other members here to help inform the submission. And so if there are nuances that need to be reflected, well, then we can sort of see how we can build those into the submission. One of the other things is that we'll have a draft submission which will provide to the delegates, assuming that that's all signed off. There is the opportunity there for representations to the delegates about positions that various members may have.
Yeah, thanks, Councillor Baker. And I say current on Te Taraki. I know you said past, but I've said before that those plans and policies are still our plans and policies until someone around here gets the votes to remove those plans and policies, and haven't seen a notice of motion coming on that. So, Member Ashby.
Kia ora, thank you for the report. Apologies for missing the very start. Two questions from me. Obviously, similar to the rural advisory panel, because of the time frame of this, so there's a common theme with these ones, the mana whenua engagement hasn't or couldn't be as fulsome as one would like. So that's because of the timing of the bill. But given what you know from the existing policies that council has that are live, and the iwi Māori input into those, and including the Mauri o Te Wai, are you confident that you're presumably looking at those, I guess is the first part of that question, and the second part, are you kind of confident that you're across those issues, that they're mapped quite well into this response? It seems so to me, but I guess I'm asking the question of you. And then just the last part is, as you go through, will you be able to circle back to mana whenua to say, hey, here's where we're at, or here's our advanced draft submission or submission? Thanks.
Thank you, Member Ashby. Yes, I am confident that we've captured those. I have brought this bill to the attention of mana whenua and provided an opportunity to feed back, but obviously with the limited timeframes, we've only had response from one. And we will absolutely be updating them as we go along with where that submission has got to.
Sorry, one supplementary. If the bill goes, just from my understanding, if the bill goes ahead in some form that, for example, knocks the hierarchy for Te Mana o Te Wai, what's the impact flow on to our regional version of that, Te Mauri o Te Wai?
So the proposed change only relates specifically to the consideration of the hierarchy of obligations and resource consent decision making, so it's quite an isolated thing. We are still required to give effect to Te Mana o Te Wai and the hierarchy of obligations, at least under the current version of the NPSFM, for all other obligations. So that still remains. Obviously, if the NPSFM changes, then that might look a little bit different.
Thank you, Member Ashby. Councillor Turner.
Thank you. The word you said in there that in there we talked about stock exclusion and accepted now only for intensively. Is the description of the definition of intensively all in this stuff, or does council deliver those sorts of terms, those sorts of definitions?
Thank you. No, the definition of intensive grazing is in the stock exclusion regulations itself, so that's means break feeding, grazing on annual forage crops, or grazing on pasture that has been irrigated with water in the previous 12 months. So it is quite a specific legal definition.
That's that's not part of the thing that we're putting a submission on. That's our own. That's our own.
No, that's the national regulations. It's outlined in there, and so.
Okay,
but they're not proposing to change the definition of intensive grazing, so we're not going to be submitting specifically on that definition.
Okay, I reserve my right to speak, please.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Walker.
Sure. I've just got a question around B5, neither opposed nor supportive of repealing intensive winter grazing resource consent requirements. I mean, I've read the agenda item, and you know, I would have thought that we would have taken a position in opposition, which we mentioned in principle in the agenda.
Yeah, it's a really good point. So previously we have supported, intensive winter grazing regulations in principle, even though we don't currently have them in the region. The reason we are neutral now is because where intensive winter grazing is carried out, some regional councils do have more nuanced rules in their regional plans to control that. And so those councils might be supportive of removing them at a national level to prevent duplication, whereas councils that don't have plans or rules in their regional plan, they might want them in. And so we felt, because of that nuance and because it's not practiced in the region, we would defer to those regional councils where it is commonly practiced, because they may have different positions.
So, just further, Mr. Chair, so I understand your explanation. Is that explanation going to be included in our submission?
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor. Deputy Chair, Councillor Dalton.
Thank you. I just wanted to clarify again the Te Mana o Te Wai. So what you're saying there is, under the resource consenting process decision making, this is just one of the things that's looked at, and it's been excluded from this decision making. So what we're saying is, out of all the things that are weighed up when we make a decision, this is the one that they're choosing to exclude. For what good reason did they give?
The reason cited was to give certainty to resource consent processes, although the regulatory impact statement didn't find any evidence that would occur.
Perhaps I could just add, the drive here is, if you read the government's narrative, is about balancing up the different values associated with water, as opposed to the hierarchy that we have currently. So they're taking a much more a broader interpretation of how water is used and for what purposes, and probably relying more on local communities or councils to make that call about how those values are expressed through resource consents decisions. Now, that runs the risk of how you achieve your objective of looking after water first, if that's something that this council has previously supported. So that's the kind of issue that's in question here as it relates to the resource consenting part of that expression.
And just to pick up what Councillor Baker was saying about coal mining, actually our policy, our submission is being formed in the context of our policies, our existing policies. And for that to change, those policies would need to come back to council to be changed before we would ever change what we're putting in a submission. That is why we're saying, actually, we have a decarbonisation policy. So we don't have a coal mine, but we do not support increased carbonisation. And that is why that's recommended for our submission.
Yeah, essentially. And I think important to also recognise, where we don't have coal mines, we do use coal. And that makes that change different to the intensive winter grazing position.
And just to add to that, yeah, there is that intersect between what your existing policies are and you know, perhaps having a position that might differ from that, and whether that's actually considered to be an appropriate deviation from an existing policy. So that is a valid question, and it's really up to the committee here to be clear about that in terms of where they sit with their existing policy and any deviation from that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you so much. My question was actually similar to Councillor Walker's, but about B3. I'm a bit confused as to why we would put a position of neither opposing or supporting that one there, when in the presentation it says that deferral might impact planned work. So I'm wondering if you could talk us through that.
Yeah, so there is a minor risk that it could impact planned work, but that is quite minor, and for Auckland Council at least, that proposed change is unlikely going to have a significant impact on us. Just because of, as I said, we already have significant ecological areas identified, and because of our timeline for reviewing those, it's likely we'll have a better idea of the updated criteria by then anyway.
Perhaps I could add, maybe we're getting stuck on the words neither of the words of opposed or supportive, and maybe more the language in the submission is more about pointing out sort of the how that might potentially impact the council's work program, and so maybe that's something, Councillor, that we might want to just reflect on in terms of how we word some of the submissions for those points that we have got there that use the language neither support or oppose.
Could you maybe also clarify with Councillor Henderson and maybe the committee that SNAs with Auckland Council, we were well ahead of the game, well before the last government put the requirements. We led that through unitary plan. So we, for other areas it might be quite different, but we're actually streaks ahead of what the legislation passed by the last government actually is requiring of us.
Yeah, that's correct. And look, the real issue here is that we're talking about a time frame deferral in terms of when we can do the next batch as it were, under this particular national policy statement. What we've talked with our colleagues in Plans and Places about is what is their work program in terms of actually looking at the technical work, on the ground work that's required to actually have any changes put forward into the next round of plan changes. And that's been signalled as that's going to take a bit of time. And so what we're saying is that the risk here is probably minor in terms of, you know, the amount of time required to do the technical background work for the next batch to go through.
I'm just a bit stuck on this because I suppose, how can I phrase this in a question? Come back to me, Chair. Thank you.
I'm happy for you to unpack it because it is complex. I guess from my understanding, and I maybe shouldn't speak for the staff, but my understanding is the requirement to go faster to identify kind of doesn't relate to us because we already do this anyway. We've already done it a long time before the government change. It's sort of an odd requirement for us because we've already done it, and we consistently the current law would ask us to do something we already do, but other areas do not have. Some areas do not have SNAs.
Yeah, and that's the bit. Other areas don't have SNAs, and I'm wondering whether it's consistent with our plans and policies as a council to oppose, much like we're doing in other ways. Yeah, I don't know if that's a question, Chair, but maybe I'll speak on that a little bit later if needed. Thank you, Chair.
Did you want to? I mean, I'm happy to personally amend, but then that would be, you know, but I guess a little bit more information on this again to be helpful.
Yeah, I hear what you're saying. The other important point to recognise, and what did also contribute to our kind of neither oppose nor support, which is a bad way of saying neutral, is the proposed change doesn't stop us from identifying or updating significant ecological areas should we want to. Okay. And so it's just the minimum requirement to have them in place, and we do have that already, so we considered the proposed change relatively minor for us.
Yeah, I'm happy. I mean, I understand where you're coming from. I guess my feeling, what I've heard from other councils, was they didn't have the resource to go as fast, even though they were keen to do it. Whereas we've already done it, and we continue to do it. That's cool. With it, yeah.
So, look, I think there's some nuance here in some of the text for the submission in terms of kind of making it clear why Auckland Council might think the way it thinks about this particular issue. So that might be something we can pick up with the chair and deputy chair and Hokora.
I think being clear, and sorry, this is not good chairing, to be honest, but maybe adding some words in there, how we do support SNAs, because we already have them and we do them, we're not, it's about, it's a very important part of what we do, but this part of the legislation doesn't really apply.
So yes, that we will articulate that in the submission quite clearly.
Thank you. Councillor Leone.
Yeah, I was actually going to ask questions around the same thing, but that's been covered. The only other one that I just wanted to ask a question was on B1. And first of all, I mean, do you think that we are going to have any other opportunity to speak with mana whenua, or has it been done through any other form? Because I know you've got one piece of feedback, did you say, out of the 19 iwi? And the reason why I'm saying that is just, again, a nuance which maybe we can't add, or people may not think it's appropriate, or it is that I just believe it would be stronger if we did say, along with some mana whenua in Tamaki Makaurau, because, there's a real need for us to be working in partnership there. So just wanted some guidance on that.
Yeah, I mean, beyond the avenues that we've gone through, because of the time that we have, there probably aren't other opportunities for us to engage for this particular submission, although, as I said to Member Ashby, I will be continually following up with those same people from the various mana whenua entities, just to update them on that submission progress and to remind them if they do want to input into council submission or submit, themselves, then these are what the dates are. But because of the timeframes to prepare and get sign off for the submission, we're not really able to do it any other way, unfortunately.
Maybe if I could just add, through our national policy statement for freshwater management program, we've got a very clear indication of what mana whenua think about the hierarchy of obligations. So I think the other leaning of staff in this context for this particular aspect of resource consenting is that that's still pulling away from the direction that mana whenua wished to see. So while we may only have the one or maybe two inputs to this process, we've kind of had ongoing engagement through our plans and places staff on MPSFM matters, and so therefore we've got a reasonably level of confidence about what mana whenua think about the hierarchy of obligations as something that's important to them.
Yeah, and I think that was my point, because I know that has been happening, and I recently we presented on behalf of council for the amendments on the Māori wards, and I know just on reflection of that, it could have been a bit stronger if we had just added our relationship with mana whenua. I know that we didn't have the time as well in that situation. And I know that a lot of mana whenua have ended up doing their submissions separately on their own. So, 19 additional plus Auckland councils, and just obviously I have a feeling that we're going to be doing plenty more submissions over the next year and a half. And yeah, if there's a system that might help going forward, or whether that could be considered going forward, but I'm sure that the chair will look at that. Kia ora.
Kia ora, Councillor, and this happened under the last government too. The speed in which these and our poor staff are trying not only to encourage mana whenua and other groups to submit themselves, but to try and incorporate some. But with the speed over the last 5 years, it's very, very difficult, in my opinion. Right, are there any more questions before we ask the staff to move away? Cool, thank you. I will go to, if you could both step back, thank you for the work. I know, Brendan, you were working late into the night to try and get us details on this for the committee, so thank you both. Right, we'll go into debate now. Councillor Baker, you're first.
Yeah, so thanks. And I guess I have some unease at the fact that, and it doesn't just happen in this committee, that we get chairs recs thrown up to us while the presentation is still on the board, and we don't actually have an opportunity to consider those. And so for me, that is just a bugbear that I have in the way in which we chair our meetings, that we throw these chairs recs up at the last minute and expect us to suddenly make informed decisions. So I'd prefer that we go back to the original one, because there are parts of that I won't support. But just going to looking at these things, and I appreciate the work done by the staff and the really, really good relationship that Dave and your team, Bertie and everyone has with the Rural Advisory Panel. I know the feedback you would get on some of these things if you brought it to the Rural Advisory Panel. And so there is a way, so the excluding of the Te Mana o Te Wai, and so yes, there may not have been many, consents declined using these things cross country, but that does not stop us from making it incredibly costly and difficult for people to get consents. And I'll give you an example of some people that created a major storehouse for kiwi fruit in Glenbrook. And as part of that, they did a landscape gardening thing where they created a wetland for themselves. It wasn't an existing historical wetland, they created one. When they went to go and build the second stage, they had to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on consultants to prove to council that they didn't actually need to comply with Te Mana o Te Wai because it wasn't a historical wetland. Yet we said to them, no, it is. And so they spent hundreds of thousands of dollars to actually prove, and in the end we rolled over and said, oh, you're right. And so we need to tidy that up. We cannot, it is a blunt tool that we cannot allow to continue to happen. It is not customer facing and it is just wrong. We need to put in something there to make it more pragmatic. In terms of the low slope mapping, talking to any farmers, they will tell you that that was a dog's breakfast and remains a dog's breakfast. They're their words, not mine. There were 2 attempts from the previous government to get it right and they still couldn't. It's low slope is an issue that it has taken up. We don't need a sunset clause on it. It will bankrupt farmers because the rules will say because of your slope, you actually need to have this. It will bankrupt some farmers. And so again, it is a really poor, and it's exhibited by the way in which the previous government looked at it, said we're going to do this and then go, oh, hang on, we've got that wrong. 2 attempts to get it right and they couldn't because it is central government, it is Wellington telling everyone else this is the one size fits all that must apply. What we need, and it applies to a whole lot of this stuff, farm plans, individual farm plans, which we are a big supporter of, are the way to address many of these issues. No farmer wants to see poor waterways. No farmer wants to see poor animal health. No farmer wants to see poor land health. It is in their best interests. And I can tell you, standing at the field days yesterday with our awesome staff and hearing people come and talk to us about that, how good we are in what we do because we work individually. So we need to be really careful for what we wish for when we oppose this sort of stuff. And the things in red are blunt, they are not needed. We should be able to work and craft a really good submission on it, opposing some, supporting some with changes. But, we are the largest rural council in the country. And we are really well placed. We do some really good stuff. We need to be careful about our rhetoric when we start to oppose things. We should be potentially saying we support, but we need you to do this because what you're actually trying to do is good in some respects. I just don't like the way in which it is put up there. And so that is why I don't like your stipulating red things, because I don't agree. I haven't seen any evidence that we have had no discussion as to what the basis for some of those are. And so we had a recommendation that we would put in and that we would, there'd be a discussion. I just don't like that, and I won't be voting for many of those, and it means if we've got to do them all individually, then so be it. And, I don't like being here too long. So that's me. I think we've good work, but I think we need to be sharper. We need to be understanding more of what our rural communities, our rural businesses want, as well as everyone else.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Turner.
Thank you very much. A lot of mine is the same. I won't be voting for this because look at the coal mining. We do use coal. We are 20%, Auckland uses 20% of the country's power. Huntly produces 17% of it. We've got some of the best quality coal in the world right there. What's the result? We truck it, we bring it in by boats into Auckland and truck it to Huntly. Is that reducing carbon emissions? It doesn't make any sense. So I just won't be supporting that. And when it comes to the farming stuff, the Auckland area, which, as Councillor Baker points out, is the biggest rural, council in the country, its topography is steep to rolling in the majority, and the majority of that ground, which is farmed by lifestyle blockers, people who are there for the love of it, not the income from it. That's what they're farming. The only thing they have in common is it's done unprofitably. But those few animals pay some of their costs, they pay their rates, they pay some of the other bits and pieces, and it makes the fabric, our rural fabric of our areas and things, and our rural ambience. So they're going to be totally disadvantaged by some of these sorts of rules, and yet, as Councillor Baker points out, they love the place, they respect the place, they look after it. I can't support this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Williamson.
Yeah, look, I just want to reflect, I almost mirror the exact words of Andy Baker and of Councillor Turner. A lot of this is a complete anathema to the way I feel about where the country should be going, and I'm not going to take up a lot of time and hold up a lot of people who obviously don't hold the same opinion that I do, but I will be definitely voting against this.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Henderson.
Thank you, Chair. Look, I'm happy to support the staff advice on this given to us independently. I would have rather if we straight up opposed 3, and I sort of my question lent that way, but I'm pretty happy with the direction that has been followed up through the questioning, and thanks staff for that. Look, I'm particularly happy about 2. That's probably no surprise. But, as advised, it's clearly within our plans and our policies as a council, our freshwater, our biodiversity, our climate objectives, but it's actually about more than that. It's about leadership. Right? We are elected here to lead on these issues and to actually do what people have asked us to do over and over again through feedback, Te Tarukia Tāwhiri and all the rest of it, that we need to lead on climate and lead on freshwater management and all the rest of it. That's what people expect of us in public office. So I'm glad that we're actually doing that. The other thing I'd add is that, and we've had this stuff come out even this morning, any impact in our decision-making abilities needs to be justified or it doesn't work for me. It's about time that actually Aucklanders have more of a chance to decide their own destinies and for local decision-making to be strengthened, not continually abrogated. And that's one of the reasons why B3 wasn't a good one for me. But yeah, I'm happy to vote it through, and thank you for your leadership on this issue, Chair and Deputy Chair and staff.
Kia ora. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Lee.
Apologies for lateness, and I've missed most of this item, but I just want to make a point. It might sound like quibbling, but I thought I heard Councillor Baker say that the Auckland region is the biggest rural region in the country. In fact, territorially speaking, the Auckland region is by far the smallest region in the country, but it is the most populous, so maybe it got a wee bit mixed up there. I believe the biggest farmer in the Auckland region is the Auckland Council. That is correct. Yep. I'll just make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor. Member Henare.
Kia ora. I'm not a farmer, but I love cows and milk and steak. I totally support what Andy says. Makes sense. I know that Shane Jones doesn't make a lot of sense, but there is sense in using our own shit rather than grubby Indonesian coal. I can't understand what neither opposed nor support means. I honestly don't know what that means. If it doesn't support or oppose, what is it we are supposed to be doing? Honestly, you know, you're either for something or you're against. There's no in between, and there's certainly neither opposed nor support. If you get my drift, you're better to not have any statement at all if you don't know. I do have look. I don't want the land to be turned upside down, but I don't also want our farmers to be kicked in the backside for trying to provide me with some meat and milk and cream for my coffee. But I know that there's a problem out there that we need to I wouldn't say lead, but we need to be there, assisting as much as possible. But I just got this feeling that there is a space, and it seems to me we haven't actually got to that space where most of us agree. Because I actually think most of us agree that our environment is a bit poked at the moment, and we need to do things. But there's billions of people around the world who are actually trying to scrape a living to survive. You know, we got it good in this country. We got it fantastic in this country. Yeah, meat is dear, milk is dear, but you know what? We're not getting bombed by like the poor Gazan people, or we're not being covered by landslips like the poor brothers and sisters in Papua New Guinea. You know? So when I'm faced with neither oppose nor support, I honestly think that we've come to the point where we should just close our eyes and go away, go home for 24 hours, because that's stupid, honestly. And I'm not saying the staff or whoever wrote that are stupid. It's just, to me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. Hilda.
Kia ora, Member Ashby.
Kia ora, Chair. Yeah, look, I think for me, te mana o te wai, I've got a good understanding of that from the iwi space and the importance of that hierarchy, coming back to the point that without healthy water, none of the other stuff actually happens, be it farming, be it human health, etc. And so I support opposing the exclusion of that as the bill's currently drafted, but I do agree with some of Andy's points around some of the nuance can get lost sometimes, and with the farm, the sort of farm pond as a wetland, I've come across that myself, even in an iwi prep space where people have been hooked into an unintended consequence, I suppose. So I guess for me, I have to support this, at least item I up there, the BI, because that's consistent with what I know of the iwi space. But I I am cognizant of the nuance, as my colleague is staring into my face about some of these other issues. I'm a little worried that we're being so blunt that we can create some unintended consequences, but I'm sure in the fullness of the actual submission we could tease all of that out. I guess I'm looking for some reassurance that if this is passed, that some of these other elements can be picked up, itemised and made points of argument in council submission.
Kia ora. Thank you, members. I think is that all the comment? Did you have a comment, Councillor? No. Cool. I'll just check in. There's any other speakers? Oh, Councillor Dalton. Sorry.
Just briefly, thank you. It's been a really helpful questioning and really helpful debate. And of course, I'm assuming we're not opposing actually doing a submission, because we must do a submission. It's the content of that submission and the nuances to it, that the direction we're not all agreeing to. So I just wonder about how we get that into all of those voices into the submission process, which is going to be a little challenging, I guess, with some of the objections, because they are so nuanced. Like, there's part of it that people might actually support. It's just the way maybe that it's written. And also this debate about coal all the time. I mean, can we please get some facts around coal? What we use, what we actually use here and what we don't. That 80% of what we have is renewable energy. You know, we've got to try and understand that the statistics around this, instead of throwing up the whole coal argument and the rainbows and the unicorns, and, you know, let's get some facts around the place, because it's just not helpful to talk about things that are not true. So I don't know, Chair, I wonder, perhaps a recommendation to you is that we add Councillor Baker to the delegation to get that rural voice in, so there's some certainty that, because other members have voiced their concern as well in support of what Andy is saying from the Rural Advisory Panel. I note that our staff are yet to go to the Rural Advisory Panel, so this could have all come out, but it's such a short time frame. We don't always get to really understand that final submission. Next minute we're presenting it and half of us don't know what's going on. So if that's of help, we just need to make sure that we stand by the policies of this council, which is what the staff are doing. And if members do not like the policies of this council or the direction of this council, you were elected to do what you've got to do, so get them back and let's debate them. Let's debate them instead of just opposing everything that comes up in front of you. So if that's okay with you, Chair, I'd recommend, if Councillor Baker's willing, to be added to the delegation that inputs into the submission. Kia ora, thank you.
Kia ora. Were there any other speakers, and I can deal with that in my speaking time? Councillor Newman.
80% of this country's renewable energy is sourced from, 80% of our energy is sourced from renewable. But if you were to try and not have the 20% which is non-renewable, enjoy your cold showers, because our economy will tank if you go and try and cut it by 20%. That's the first thing. With respect, it's been ironic, Chair, that some of these recommendations are up here. I listened with interest to the discussion earlier, the platitudes about our work on the Manukau Harbour. Some of the best work on the Manukau Harbour has been led for years and years and years by the farmers who have their farming plans which address things such as stock movements and riparian rights and the abatement of effluent runoff. To me, the requirement for a sunset clause to be added for the proposal to remove stock exclusion requirements, go and read a farm plan, because they are out there and they have been very impactful to those farming operations for a long time. The work is taking place and it's good. What would be better, I think, would be to have a submission that reflects and appends some of these farming plans that take place in our region, with our council support I might add, which are incredibly helpful to our environment. But no, we're not going to do that, because we have to make a political stand, because this feels really political, and I get it. People don't like the flavour of the government. Well, you know, you'll have your time. But a submission like this that reflects some of these measures is a submission that says Auckland Council is making a series of political statements, and that submission will be largely set to one side. Thank you very much for your submission, Mr. Chair. Move on. Why? Because it doesn't add anything other than a political statement. I would like to think that we could go back to the original drafting of this, and if there is a way for, Councillor Baker needs to be part of that discussion, Councillor Turner too, but I'm disappointed, particularly after we had the earlier item where we all felt good, that we would not acknowledge some of that work, which actually, it needs to be included here, but it's not, because, you know, we're including a statement at Roman numeral 4, for which you don't actually appreciate what's already taking place. Councillor Baker is absolutely right, and I would have thought that this submission either has to be completely recast, or I don't know if you're going to take divisions, Chair, but I can't support this. Yeah, there are opportunities for a nuanced approach, but reflect on the knowledge of what we have at the moment and set the politics to one side. This bill will pass, and the other thing about Auckland, we might not have coal mines here, but this region is a very significant user of coal, and that will not change. Thank you.
Kia ora, thank you. I'm happy for Councillor Baker to be added to the if you want to be. The issue will be is that the group, however, has to form the submission based on the group. I don't know what people are going to say. I'll just have my speaking turn and then I might ask Councillor Baker at that point. I am closing the debate, but I'm happy to add Councillor Baker if he wants to be. I haven't had a nod.
Sorry, the Mayor wants to speak.
Oh, the Mayor would like to speak. Mayor Brown.
I didn't mean to stop you mid-sentence. I can see where you've got pluses and minuses and strong views here for and against various bits and pieces. I'd feel better if in the last one it said that whoever makes a submission has to at least acknowledge that there are a broad range of views at the council. Because there are a broad range of views at the council. There will be definitely people here who would not want the coal mining thing, and there are other people who definitely would want the coal mining thing. And we're never going to get that other than a vote 10-9 or something or other, which is... So I would like to see that if it goes this way, that's fine, whatever the vote goes, but I think that when whoever does make the submission has to say there are a broad range of views on this issue. I'd almost like that added if I could, but as long as the people who are making it are prepared to say that, I'll be okay.
Thank you, Mayor, and that will definitely be part of the submission, that we have various views. Councillor Ferry.
Thanks. I wasn't going to speak on this debate, but I did just want to address the issue of the role of these submissions. So, you know, we do have a role, and we have taken up that role with repeated governments of different flavours and colours in order to advocate in line with our existing policies, in line with what our community tells us. And yes, that's political. We should own that. We are politicians, we do politics. Politics is the process by which we make collective decisions, in particular about resources, which is relevant here. And I think it's entirely appropriate for us to make a submission to a central government process that reflects the political views around the table. Now, what I'm hearing is that the political views around the table are quite varied on this, and I've had some assurance from the chair that that will be part of the submission. I note that the process for this has been incredibly fast, and we've all noted that over the last 5 years, a lot of these processes have got faster and faster, and those do compromise our ability to work through these things carefully and collaboratively to come up with something that everybody can support when we come to this part of the process. So I think the fact that we're debating it in public now, the fact that we've got a chair who's going to take this in parts so people can, you know, bits of it will pass or not, and then form part of our submission. I think actually this is okay. This is a healthy process. We're debating it. We're going to vote. The submitters will reflect the nuance. The particular issues around the rural community are now going to be in part dealt with Councillor Baker's input on behalf of the Rural Advisory Panel. I think we're heading in a good direction. Personally, I'm comfortable to support what's in front of us, acknowledge others are not. Yeah, this is politics. Let's do some politics, because we're politicians elected through a political process to do that.
Sorry, Councillor Lee, you've already had your speaking turn, even though it was small. If you... With your own, for yourself?
With this council, actually.
Okay, it's not technically appropriate to raise if it's conflicts we perceive of other members of the table.
I have a question.
We're not. We're in debate. Sorry, Councillor Lee.
Can I ask a question when you're in debate?
Your discretion.
I mean, yes, you can ask a question, but I will.
We are in debate.
We've been debating for quite some time. Councillor Lee, you don't have your microphone on.
Yes, I'll be very brief.
You don't have your microphone on.
The council's made imported coal come through the Port of Auckland, and if we're opposed to competition, local competition, it's something that needs to be thought through, that's all. I'll make that point. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. I'll just speak briefly. And look, it is disappointing to thank you. It is, I guess, a disappointment to me that no one's contacted me before this meeting, and that's fine, we're all busy. The points that I had put up there in red were because I said to the staff, and Councillor Dalton will hopefully back me up, I said the other day, I do not want an A put up there that just says we're going to prepare a submission and no one knows what the heck is going to say, and everyone goes, what are we going to do? So I said, could you please list a few of the main points that you'll be putting forward based on our current plans and policies, and this is what came forward. So I didn't have a say on what came forward in this list. This was only prepared late yesterday. It's a very busy week. That was my attempt to try and make this more transparent. Otherwise, we are just approving what the delegated group will be doing. The issue is we cannot do a submission by committee. It's very hard. The other issue is the speed. We do not have time to go to the Rural Advisory Panel. We do not have time to go back to Mana Whenua. We do not have time to go to local boards. We do not have time. This is happening under this government every week, but it happened under last government, and we all complained about that too. The speed at which our officers are required to give feedback and collate feedback is impossible. But we either make a decision not to give a submission because it's too fast and not have a say, or we try and craft a submission based on our current plans and policies, which this submission will be. What I wanted to do is make sure people, especially people who weren't here last term, were able to see some of the things that the staff would be writing on, because we won't have time to go back and forth and take things out and put things in and ask for votes through email in an untransparent way. So this wasn't me trying to trick anyone or put politics in there. And I do laugh, you know, the people that mention politics all the time around here are often being quite political. So the issue is we have Te Tara Ki a Tāwhiri, that is our climate plan, supported by all local boards last term and every member of that committee that day. And I've said it a number of times that if there are members of this council who want to remove the climate plan, the water strategy, or other things, then they have to put up a notice of motion and get the votes to remove that. But the staff have to continue to work within our current plans, policies and strategies. It's not me trying to trick anyone. It's about being honest to the community that the committees, the politicians and Hokura members around this table have supported over this term and last term, and those don't change. So I guess the submission is based on our reaction to very quick legislation based on our current plans and policies. But what boils it down for me is Te Mana o Te Wai, that was hugely supported about this council, mana whenua, local boards, once again community, because it's the protection of water. There's nothing more important, as Member Ashby says, in our communities than that. I don't see this as an attack on anyone. My family are all farmers. My whole dad's side of the family still own the farms up north. We're all, this is not an attack on anyone. This is about regulations. If people are doing the right thing, then these sorts of regulations shouldn't bother them. I do understand what Councillor Baker has said, and we have discussed these through the MPSFM working groups around farm plans because we wanted to do that work. That has been delayed because the policies and things have changed. We do want that advice coming through. The opposed or not supportive, to Member Henare's points, those were in there because we have to give feedback. So we could either be very strong, we're against, and just write that, or the submission would be, we're neutral on this, but here's some really good points about what the council's policies and positions are. It doesn't mean we're not giving a view, it's giving the nuance of those views. So I guess for me, we don't have to put in a submission, but I think it's important that we do. The hard thing is that we need to do it from our current plans of policies or change that. I'm happy to go for a division on B as a whole, but I think if people could record their votes against which parts of that in a noting form would probably be the easiest way to do it, if that's okay. So we'll go A, all those in favour, then we'll go B, a full division, and then people can say, yes, but I oppose 3, 4, 5, or whatever that is. And we will ensure, we'll go to lunch after this, and Sandra will ensure, and Sonia will ensure that your names are against those things. If those lose, that is absolutely fine. That just won't be in the submission. But staff have got to go away now, write this, and then come back to a group of us to try and formulate the sentences without, going back and forth 1,000 times.
Sorry, Chair. Just for transparency, I wonder if members could be directed to verbalise what they're voting against, because it's a submission for the whole council. Yeah. It's just good to know.
Yeah, so you'll have to verbalise, and then we can double check that your name is against what it is. So all those in favour on A?
Aye.
We'll do a division on B. So that means you can say yes or no and then give notifications if it's part of.
Thank you. Members, you're voting on clause B, which is...
so that's B, the whole lot?
Yeah. But you could say I vote in favour of B, but I vote against B 3 and 4 or something.
Sorry, can we just move the box so that people can see which bits are which? Thank you.
Thank you, members. So you're voting on clause B, which is on the screen. Chair Hills.
In favour.
Member Ashby.
In favour.
Councillor Baker.
I'm against, but I'm okay with, is it 9, 1x? Is it 1? Is it 9?
Sorry.
I think those numbers have changed.
Yeah, it's just the automatic numbering.
Let's just call them B 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah, I'm okay with 3.
Thank you. Councillor Bartley has left the meeting. Mayor Brown.
Oh, So you're supportive and not supportive?
You need to use a mic. You need to use a mic.
I'm Julie Baker, I'm against the petition.
Sorry, so okay with
Opposed.
clause 3.
No, I'm just against one that's just so messy, so I'm against.
Okay, thank you. Against. Councillor Dalton.
For.
Councillor Ferry.
For.
Councillor Fuli.
For.
Member Henare.
Oh, me?
Yes.
Sorry.
Member Henare.
See, I'm rather for or against. Nah.
Thank you. Councillor Henderson.
For.
Councillor Lee.
I can be forgiven. I will abstain. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Leone.
For.
Councillor Newman.
I'm opposed to B, but I would be comfortable to support 6, which is Roman numeral 12 there, isn't it?
Number
So you're for it, but against those clauses.
Well, I'm opposed to B, but by exception, well, I thought it was 6, but it appears to be numeral 6, Roman numeral 12 there.
So the mark is against or,
Well,
sorry,
did-
it's either a yes or a no. Against the, for the motion.
I'm against.
Thank
How's
you.
that?
Thank you.
no.
Councillor Sayers.
Thank you. I'm against, but Chair, could I just point out that we're not recording the votes as we go, as we usually do, so councillors can't double check if their vote is being recorded for or against as a double check. So I'm not sure why that's happening, but my vote is against, and I'm just unsure
There you
why
go,
we're not
councillor.
recording
Sorry,
as
it
we go.
wasn't. There you go, councillor. It's there.
Councillor Stewart.
Lovely, thanks.
Councillor Stewart.
Against.
Councillor Turner.
Against.
Councillor Walker.
For.
Councillor Watson.
Abstain.
Councillor Williamson.
Against.
So the vote is equal. So Chair, you have a casting vote.
A casting vote on a submission seems. I'm almost at a point where we just don't put a submission in.
I'll move that, Mr. Chair.
Because they are our current plans and policies, I will go in favour, but with a caveat, it'll be recorded in favour, but I am willing to, because I don't like the fact that it's so divided, that we'll sit with Councillor Baker and work out some nuance in there on some of the things. So technically, my vote will be in favour of everything that's up here, but I am saying now that let's just sit down and we will send that out to the full committee, okay? But
So you're supportive, but you're not.
well, my vote is in support. I'm just being clear that I don't want to look like I'm being.
You don't want to look like an ogre.
Yeah. So I think.
We're in the middle of a division.
Yeah. So my call is in favour of giving a submission on these points as there are current plans and policies.
Thank you. So that is declared carried.
Right. So we're going to go to lunch now.
Oh, sorry, we're just going to do C.
Oh, and C. So C, all those in favour? Any opposed? No. Thank you. We're going to go for lunch for half an hour. We'll be back at 2:15.